I've hosted a dozen dinners like that one. Same restaurant, same reserved corner table at East Stone Grill, same polished silverware lined up like soldiers. It was a business thing, a small celebration with our investment partners after closing a particularly thorny deal. I had arranged everything meticulously. What I hadn't planned on was Olivia. She showed up unannounced. There was a moment when every fork froze midair. She strolled in like she belonged there, and technically she did as my wife. Still, that wasn't the point. Olivia was dressed like she was going somewhere far less formal, all curves and confidence in a silky blue dress that caught more than one pair of eyes. She smiled like a woman with a secret and kissed my cheek just long enough to throw off the rhythm of the table. "I thought I'd surprise you," she said, sliding into the empty seat beside me, then waved the waiter over like she'd done it 100 times. "Cabernet, please." The guys at the table, all seasoned professionals, mostly older, chuckled politely. A few made small talk with her. I could see a few of them appreciating her presence, mistaking her timing for charm instead of intrusion. I tried to smile, tried to make it seem like this was normal. Like I wasn't completely thrown off by her sudden appearance. And then she turned, not to me, but across the table. To Jalen. Jalen was a startup guy, mid-20s, the youngest person at the table by a decade. Bright kid, good instincts. I'd only recently brought him into the fold, thought he might be useful down the line with some of the newer tech initiatives we were exploring. He'd been quiet until then, respectful. But when Olivia leaned forward, chin in hand, and started asking about his company, his hobbies, even his star sign, I watched him shift in his seat. "Pisces," she said, teasing. "Ah, that explains the dreamy eyes." He chuckled nervously, clearly unsure of the appropriate way to respond. I couldn't blame him. Olivia was magnetic when she wanted to be. She laughed at everything he said, tucked her hair behind her ear every time he looked up. She leaned in so close I half expected her wine glass to tip into his lap. I saw the way Jalen avoided my eyes. Poor guy didn't know if he should enjoy it or apologize. I tried to cut in a few times, redirect the conversation back to the table, back to the reason we were there. But Olivia wouldn't let go. She asked Jalen if he surfed, if he had a girlfriend, if he liked older women. That one got a few laughs. One of the partners actually clapped the table. I forced a smile, swallowing the acid that was rising in the back of my throat. My smartwatch buzzed twice. I glanced down and saw that it had auto-activated the camera feature. Discreetly, it was recording. Some security setting I'd installed months ago in case of emergencies. It kicked in when it detected irregular audio spikes. I didn't think much of it at the time. I let it roll. The rest of the dinner was a blur. I barely tasted my food. Every time Olivia leaned toward Jalen or laughed a little too loud, I felt something inside me coil tighter. There were times in the past when she'd flirted in social settings. It was part of her charm, part of what made her so disarming. But this felt different. Calculated. She was performing, but not for me. After the dinner, we didn't ride home together. She said she wanted to grab another drink and waved off my concern like it was silly. "You go ahead," she said with a wink. "I'll Uber. Don't wait up." That night, she came home around 2 a.m., her heels clicking softly against the hardwood. I was in the kitchen, lights off, sipping cold coffee. She looked surprised to see me still up. "Didn't think you'd be waiting," she said casually, kicking off her shoes. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, watching her as she poured herself water. Her lipstick was smudged. Her dress was wrinkled. Her smile was not for me. "What was that tonight?" I asked quietly. She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "At the table. With Jalen." "What was that?" She gave a soft laugh. "Oh, come on. That was just dinner conversation. You're not jealous, are you?" I held up my wrist and tapped the screen. My watch was recording. It caught everything. Her expression faltered for just a second, a flicker of something sharp like calculation. Then she smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You recorded me," she said, her voice suddenly sharper. "You were spying on me at a business dinner?" It was automatic. It wasn't intentional. "Oh, sure. Convenient excuse. What were you planning to do? Save the footage? Blackmail me? God, Scott." I stared at her, stunned by how quickly she'd turned it around. "You know what?" she continued, folding her arms. "Maybe that was the point. Maybe I wanted to see how you'd react. And guess what? You failed." My breath caught. "What are you talking about?" She stepped closer, eyes burning. "You've been so distant lately, buried in work, ignoring me. So yeah, I flirted with the kid. And you know what? You didn't say a word, not then. You just sat there, recording me, like some paranoid surveillance creep. You came to my dinner uninvited and flirted with a guy half your age in front of everyone. And what were you doing? Sitting there stewing and pretending to smile? You couldn't even talk to me about it until you had video evidence. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but her words hit like a tidal wave. I knew what I saw. I knew how it felt. But somehow, she'd made it feel like I was the one in the wrong. That night, I lay in bed beside her, wide awake, my thoughts in knots. And for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even confused. I was doubting myself. I found myself scrolling back through old texts between us, trying to find some breadcrumb, some moment where things had shifted. I remembered the way she used to ask about my meetings, about the deals I was working on, the way she used to lean in when I talked about my clients, even the boring ones. Lately, those conversations had stopped. Lately, she'd been checking out. I looked over at her, asleep now, curled up on her side of the bed, peaceful, untouched by the storm in my chest. I knew something had changed, not just tonight, but before. But Olivia? She had turned the whole thing around so smoothly, so convincingly, that I couldn't be sure where the truth ended and the manipulation began. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember when exactly I'd stopped recognizing the woman beside me. The morning after that dinner, Olivia was back to her usual self, making coffee, scrolling through her phone, acting like nothing happened. I watched her from across the kitchen island, noting how easily she slipped back into her rhythm. It was like the previous night had been a scene in a movie she'd already forgotten. I hadn't. She wore my old college sweatshirt, something I used to find endearing. That morning it felt like camouflage. "Morning," she said, without looking up. Her voice was light, unbothered. "Do you want eggs?" I shook my head. "No appetite." She gave a half shrug and went back to tapping her screen. Later, when she left for yoga, or at least that's what she said she was doing, I sat down on the couch, opened a fresh page in my journal, and wrote 3 words. Trust is shrinking. I stared at the sentence for a long time. That day, I started seeing everything differently. The little things I used to brush off as quirks or mood swings now felt like clues I'd failed to notice. It's strange how a single moment can fracture your entire perspective. After that dinner, I couldn't look at our life the same way again. There was the phone password, for instance. Olivia had changed it 2 weeks earlier. I remember because I tried to open her phone once, to play music while we were cooking, and she yanked it out of my hands. "New lock," she said with a smile. "You never remember the code anyway." She laughed it off. So did I. Back then, I believed her. Now, not so much. She used to leave her phone charging on the nightstand. Lately, it was always face down, in her purse, or tucked under a pillow. I'd walk into the room and she'd slide the screen away so fast it looked rehearsed. There was a call she got 3 nights after the dinner. I walked into the bedroom and she was laughing, not just a chuckle, but the kind of laugh she used to save for inside jokes. She saw me, froze, and ended the call mid-sentence. "Who was that?" I asked. She blinked. "Nobody. Just Gina." She was telling me some story about her new dog. I knew Gina. Gina didn't have a dog. But I let it go. Not because I believed her, but because I didn't have the energy to dig. I didn't want to be that guy. The one who checked browser histories. The one who waited for her to leave just to snoop. That's not who I was. But lately, that line had started to blur. Then there was the weekend trip. Olivia told me she was going to visit her mother. "She hasn't been feeling great," she said. "Just going to check on her for a couple days. Maybe bring her some soup and catch up." She even packed like she meant it, small duffel, makeup bag, sensible clothes. She kissed me on the cheek before she left and reminded me to water her plants. 2 days later, her mom called our landline. That alone was strange. No one used the landline anymore. When I picked up, she sounded chipper. "Tell Liv I found that old photo album she wanted," she said. I hesitated. "She's not with you?" There was a long pause. "I thought she was with you," her mom replied. I ended the call gently, told her Olivia must have made other plans. I didn't say anything to Olivia when she got home. Not then. I needed more than suspicion. But I kept the lie tucked away like a puzzle piece waiting for the rest of the image to come together. That weekend, I noticed something else. Her wardrobe. It had shifted subtly at first. A tighter dress here, a lower neckline there. Olivia had always been stylish, but this was different. She started wearing heels to brunch. Lingerie I hadn't seen before. New perfume muskier than her usual floral scent. When I asked if we were going out that night, she shrugged. No plans. I just felt like dressing up. And then there was the question. Hey, she asked one Thursday as I was reviewing client reports, what's your schedule look like next week? I told her I had meetings Monday through Wednesday, dinner with the LA group Thursday, and a charity event Friday. She nodded and said nothing more. Later, I realized she hadn't asked about my work in weeks. She used to be curious. Used to ask how deals were going, who I'd met, what cities I'd be flying to. That curiosity was gone, replaced by precision. She didn't want to know what I was doing. She wanted to know when I wouldn't be home. That hit me hardest. Because somewhere along the way, my wife had stopped investing in me and started studying my patterns. I told myself it could be stress. People drift. Maybe she was going through something she hadn't shared. Maybe it had nothing to do with me. I wanted to believe that. But the gaps were adding up. There was one night, late, when I got up for water and found her in the kitchen. The lights were dim and she was standing in front of the fridge, staring into it like she'd forgotten what she came for. You okay? I asked. She jumped. Not just startled, genuinely shaken. I thought you were asleep, she said. You didn't answer my question. She reached for a bottle of water, her hands shaking just slightly. I'm fine. Just couldn't sleep. She went back upstairs without drinking it. The next morning, I noticed her overnight bag, the one she'd taken to her mom's, sitting by the laundry machine. Something made me open it. Inside was a dress. Wrinkled, sequined, deep red. Not the kind of thing you wear to your mother's. Not the kind of thing you ever wear around me. I didn't ask her about it. Not because I didn't care, but because I was scared of the answer. I started walking around with a sense of imbalance, like the ground beneath me had shifted and I was the only one trying to pretend it was stable. Every conversation felt loaded. Every touch felt delayed. And yet she still smiled. Still kissed me goodnight. Still laughed when we watched reruns of old sitcoms on the couch. But I saw it, the hollowness behind the performance. Once I watched her type out a message and then delete it. She stared at the screen for a long time before putting the phone away. I didn't ask who it was meant for. I didn't need to. I began journaling more. Writing down everything. Not just for clarity but to stay grounded. I needed to remind myself that I wasn't imagining this, that the coldness in her voice, the careful dodging of questions, the sudden bursts of affection that felt timed, they weren't random. They were rehearsed. At night, I'd lie beside her, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, wondering where she'd gone, not physically, but emotionally. Wondering who she texted when she turned away from me. Wondering if she ever looked at me the way she used to. I didn't want to be suspicious. I didn't want to be the man counting the lies, stacking them like kindling. But Olivia had handed me the matches. And the moment she had flirted across that dinner table like I wasn't sitting beside her, she lit the first spark. I just hadn't admitted it yet. But now every moment between us was replaying in my head with new meaning. Every excuse, every smile, every trip, every laugh, all of it being redefined by the silence that followed. Something had shifted, and I was finally ready to look at it head-on. 2 weeks passed after the dinner at East Stone and I become someone I didn't recognize. Hyper-aware. On edge. Constantly parsing Olivia's words for double meanings. I wasn't just second-guessing her, I was second-guessing myself. I started leaving earlier for work just to think. Sitting in the car for an extra 10 minutes before walking into the office. I'd sip lukewarm coffee and replay her expressions, her phrasing, the way she said, "I'll be back late," like it had nothing to do with me. I wasn't paranoid, I was attentive. There's a difference. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. What finally cracked it open was a rainy Saturday afternoon. I remember the exact weather because I planned to mow the lawn, but the sky turned dark and poured unexpectedly. Olivia had gone out for a spa day with a friend I barely knew, Rachel, someone from her yoga class. The house was quiet. I sat in the living room, flipping channels, trying not to spiral. But when I reached for the remote, I noticed her tablet wedged between the cushions. She never used it for much, streaming, shopping maybe. I figured it was harmless. I tapped the screen. No password. My heart thudded like I was breaking some unwritten rule, but I kept telling myself, if she had nothing to hide, then what harm could there be? What I found wasn't just a mistake. It was a portal. The tablet had synced with her phone, something I didn't even know she had set up. Photos, messages, even her notes app were mirrored here. And there, nestled between **TS of dresses and brunch pics, was a photo I couldn't unsee. It was Olivia. In a hotel room. She was wrapped in a white robe that barely clung to her body, her legs draped over a man's lap. His face was turned toward hers, their foreheads almost touching, their eyes closed in that way people do when the rest of the world disappears. The man was smiling. So was she. The timestamp was from 2 weekends ago, the same one she claimed she spent at her mom's. I zoomed in. The lighting was soft. Her lips were parted. Her makeup was smudged in a way that wasn't accidental. I looked for something, anything to tell me it wasn't what it looked like. Instead, I found more. *TS. Snippets of conversations. His name, Trey Harris. I froze. Trey was from her past. A college boyfriend she once called a mistake wrapped in abs. She told me they'd reconnected once on social media but hadn't spoken in years. The text said otherwise. They were synced too, hundreds of them. Not flirty. Not casual. In asterisk mate. Detailed. There were jokes I didn't understand. Nicknames I'd never heard. Confessions. I've never felt more alive than when I'm with you, she wrote. Trey's response, we'll figure it out. Just keep being you. Soon, we won't have to hide. Another text, days later, last night felt like the start of something. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't an affair fueled by wine and impulse. It was a second life. Olivia was planning for a future. Without me. I sat there, tablet in hand, numb. Every breath felt sharp. I scrolled deeper, past emojis and photo attachments and heart reactions. They had pet names. Inside jokes. They talked about restaurants they wanted to try. Cities they wanted to move to. He sent her playlists. She sent him photos, some of them in asterisk mate, others mundane. A cup of coffee, a sunrise, her legs in a bathtub. Ordinary snaps *TS that felt private because they weren't shared with me. What gutted me most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the softness. The way she wrote to him like he was a piece of her she didn't know was missing. That's the kind of an Macy you can't fake. And she never looked at me that way anymore. I took *TS of everything. Transferred the files to my drive. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet, I just knew I couldn't let them disappear. The photos. The chats. The timestamps. The truth. I left the tablet where I found it. When Olivia got home that evening, I was in the kitchen making pasta. She walked in humming, towel drying her hair like she just had a relaxing massage. She kissed my cheek, asked how my day was. I don't know how I didn't flinch. Uneventful, I said. Rain ruined everything. She poured herself wine, went upstairs to change, and came back down in sweats. We ate in front of the TV, watching a crime drama like nothing had happened. But everything had. That night, while she showered, I looked up the hotel from the photo. It wasn't far, a boutique spot in the city, 20 minutes away. I scrolled through the photos on their website until I found the exact headboard. The same lamps. The same window curtains. I felt like I was crawling through a maze I didn't remember entering. She came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her skin dewy, her hair pinned up. You okay? She asked, noticing my expression. Yeah, I lied. She slid into bed, turned off the lamp, and leaned her back into me. Her warmth felt like betrayal. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the hotel. I didn't have a plan, just a need to be near the scene of the crime. I parked across the street, heart pounding. Part of me hoped I was wrong. But I wasn't. As I sat there, sipping burnt gas station coffee, a man walked out of the hotel. Trey. I recognized him from Facebook. From one of Olivia's old photo albums. He hadn't changed much, still tall, confident, too polished. He walked to a corner cafe and sat outside, texting. 15 minutes later, Olivia showed up. Not in workout clothes. In heels. She kissed him on the cheek. I snapped a photo. Then another. They sat close. Her hand on his leg. His fingers brushing hers. They looked like a couple who had nothing to hide. And in that moment, I felt something inside me click into place. The denial was over. This wasn't a maybe. It was undeniable. I watched them for 10 more minutes. I took video. Still images. I documented the truth not just for evidence, but because I needed to see it with my own eyes. Needed to burn it into my brain so I'd never question it again. That night, Olivia came home humming. Same as always. She tossed her keys into the dish, slipped off her shoes, and smiled like she wasn't tearing me apart with every lie. She asked what we should do for dinner. I said I wasn't hungry. She poured herself a glass of wine, then reached for her phone. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. Probably texting Trey goodnight. I stared at her, memorizing her face. Not because I loved her. Because I wanted to remember what a lie looked like. I was done guessing. I was done giving her the benefit of the doubt. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something like resolve. She had built this fantasy world with Trey. Now, I was going to make sure she didn't get to live in it comfortably. The next few days passed in a kind of suspended reality, like walking through a dream you couldn't quite wake from. Everything looked the same on the surface. Olivia still kissed me goodbye in the morning. Still left reminders on the fridge, called Greg about the gutters. Still tossed her laundry in with mine like we were living the same life. But I knew better now, and that made every second feel heavier. I'd collected enough evidence to fill a folder. The photos, the texts, the hotel visits. I knew about Trey Harris, the man she once dismissed with a casual, he was a dumb phase. The man she now called T with a red heart emoji next to his name. She hadn't just lied. She'd replaced me. And yet I still hadn't confronted her. It wasn't cowardice. Not exactly. It was strategy. I needed time to plan, not just for the confrontation, but for what came after. The unraveling of a marriage doesn't happen in one argument. It happens in paperwork, in property divisions, in unraveling the life you built together one thread at a time. I called a lawyer, Valerie Krantz. She came highly recommended by a client who'd gone through something similar. Valerie's voice was calm, decisive. She didn't gasp when I told her Olivia was cheating. She just asked for dates, documentation, and whether or not we had a prenup. We did. Olivia hated that we signed one years ago. Called it cold, said it made love feel transactional. But I signed it anyway. It was the only decision I didn't regret. Valerie walked me through next steps. She sent me intake forms. We discussed assets. She told me not to tip Olivia off until we had everything lined up. Once she knows, Valerie said, her behavior could change overnight. That scared me. Because if Olivia could lie so easily while pretending to be happy, I didn't want to know what she was capable of when the curtain dropped. So I waited. One night I followed her again. This time I didn't stay across the street. I walked into the lobby of the hotel and sat down in the lounge with a newspaper. I saw her walk in, dressed in a white coat, heels clicking against the tile. I saw Trey greet her at the bar. They kissed. A real kiss. Not a polite brush, not a sneaky peck. A kiss like they were the only people in the world. I snapped the photo and left. That was the final straw. I forwarded everything to Valerie that night and told her to proceed. The papers were drawn up by Friday. I printed a copy and sealed them in an envelope. I kept it in my drawer for 2 more days. Then came Sunday night. Olivia came home late, the kind of late that didn't come with an excuse anymore. She walked in humming, a half-finished iced coffee in her hand, her makeup still fresh. I was sitting in the living room when she came through the door. She didn't see me at first. "Hey," she said, startled. "You're still up?" "Just thinking." She gave a half-smile and walked into the kitchen. "Want tea?" "No," I said. "Sit down." She turned, something in her body language changing instantly. She knew that tone. We'd used it before, during fights, during moments when one of us was about to say something we couldn't take back. She sat on the edge of the couch, still in her coat. I reached into the side table drawer and slid the envelope across the coffee table. "What's this?" "You know what it is." She hesitated, then opened it. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the first page. Then the second. "Scott," she began. I held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't." Her mouth opened, but no words came. "You've been seeing him for months," I said, my voice steady. "I know about the hotel. The messages. The photos." She closed the envelope and set it down gently, like it might explode. "I wasn't going to tell you," she said finally, "not like this." "No," I said. "You weren't going to tell me at all." There was a silence so heavy I could hear the fridge humming in the kitchen. Olivia stared at the floor. "I didn't plan it," she said quietly. "It just happened. That's what people say when they want to avoid responsibility." She looked up at me then, eyes wet, makeup starting to smear. "Scott, I didn't do this to hurt you." "Then who did you do it for?" She blinked. "I don't know. For me, I guess." "For you," I repeated, the words bitter in my mouth. "You stopped seeing me," she said, her voice rising. "You were always working, always distracted. I felt like a ghost in my own home. So you found someone else." "I didn't find him. He found me." We reconnected. At first, it was just catching up. And then it was hotel rooms, I said flatly. She flinched. "It wasn't supposed to go that far," she whispered. "But it did." She nodded. We sat in silence. She cried. Quiet, steady tears that dripped down her cheeks and into her collar. I didn't comfort her. Eventually, she stood and said, "Is there someone else? Is that why you're being so calm?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. "No," I said. "There's no one else. Just me. And the truth." That night, she moved into the guest room. She didn't ask me to reconsider. Didn't beg. Didn't deny it. The next morning, I heard her in there, crying into a pillow. I stayed in bed and stared at the ceiling. I was done. 2 days later, she left for good. She packed in silence. I let her. She carried 2 suitcases and a duffel bag out to the car and didn't look back. The house was quieter than I expected. But not lonely. Peaceful. Later that week, I drove by the hotel again, just to see if she'd returned to him. She did. I parked across the street and watched them at the bar, drinking cocktails, laughing. Her hand rested on his thigh. She looked relaxed. She looked like someone who hadn't just detonated her life. I snapped one more photo. For the file. For closure. That night, Olivia came back drunk. Not stumbling, not loud, just unsteady. She walked in without saying a word and slumped onto the couch. "You were at the hotel," I said. She didn't answer. I sat across from her. "You really think this is going to work? That he's going to be your clean slate?" She looked at me, mascara streaked down her face. "I don't know," she said. "But it already feels better than this." I stood up and walked away. She passed out on the couch. In the morning, she was gone again. I never asked where. I didn't care. The paperwork went through quickly. No contests, no surprises. She signed everything, even apologized in her final email. "I wish things were different," she wrote. But they weren't. They were exactly what she made them. And I was finally free to walk away from the wreckage. When Olivia left for good, I didn't expect to feel anything. No sorrow. No anger. Just a silence so deep it felt like the house had finally exhaled after holding its breath for years. But what I hadn't counted on was what came next, not for me, but for her. It started small. A phone call from a mutual acquaintance, someone from her nonprofit board. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "Did you guys split?" I didn't offer details. "Yeah, we did." He hesitated. I asked because there's a video circulating. From a business dinner. She's in it. Flirting with some guy. I froze. "You've seen it?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I was there." "Oh," he replied, voice dropping. "I didn't realize she showed up uninvited?" "Correct." "And the guy, the young one," he looked uncomfortable. He was. A beat of silence. Then, "I'm sorry, Scott. I didn't say anything." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet, wondering who else had the video. I'd forgotten all about it. The footage from my smartwatch, the one that had captured her sliding into the seat next to me, acting like it was her stage, her show. At some point, I'd uploaded the clip to my cloud drive, not with malice, just for documentation. Somehow, someone had accessed it. Maybe it was my attorney's team. Maybe a friend. Either way, it had found its way into the world. Not publicly. Not yet. But enough to start spreading through certain circles, the professional ones where reputations are everything. The second call came 2 days later. Olivia had been placed on leave. That's what they said. She'd worked with a nonprofit for youth leadership, a well-connected, image-sensitive organization. Their funding depended on donations, optics, community support. The board had caught wind of the video and someone on it didn't like what they saw. Apparently, they'd confronted her in a closed meeting. Someone said she called it a personal misunderstanding. That it had nothing to do with work. But it was too late. The damage wasn't about the truth, it was about perception. And what they saw in that clip was a woman too comfortable crossing lines. By the end of the week, she was officially out. No statement. No press. Just erased. I didn't feel vindicated. Just hollow. But the fallout kept spreading. One morning, I got a message from her old friend Natalie, someone Olivia used to brunch with every other weekend. "Guess it's true what they say about karma." That was all she wrote. But then she posted something on her social media vague enough to avoid liability but pointed enough for those who knew. Nothing worse than a woman who pretends to uplift others while she's secretly tearing her own life apart. No names. No details. But people read between the lines. Mutuals commented with thinly veiled jabs. One said, "Some people only lead when there's a spotlight." Another wrote, "Can't pour from an empty integrity cup." It spiraled from there. Her followers dropped. Partnerships disappeared. An old podcast she guested on removed her episode without explanation. And Trey? He didn't last long. I don't know exactly when it happened, but the texts stopped coming. At first, Olivia kept trying. I still had access to her old tablet, she never unlinked it. I watched the final messages roll in. "Are you okay? Please don't go quiet like this. I'm scared." And then silence. He ghosted her. Trey Harris, her second chance, evaporated as soon as the consequences caught up. A week later, she called me. I stared at the screen. Her name. The same ringtone. I didn't answer. Then a text, "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. She sent another, "Please. Just 5 minutes." Still nothing. I didn't ignore her out of spite. I did it because I had nothing left to give. She wasn't asking for reconciliation. She was reaching out because she was cornered, exposed, alone, and I wasn't her safe space anymore. She tried again a few days later, an email this time. Long, rambling, regretful. She talked about everything spiraling. How she didn't recognize herself. How she never meant for it to go so far. I thought I was chasing freedom, she wrote. But it was just noise. You were the only thing that ever made me feel grounded. I'm sorry I ruined that. I read it once. Then again. And then I archived it. That night, I went for a walk, something I hadn't done in a while. It was dusk and the air was cool. I passed by the old bookstore we used to visit on Sundays. They'd changed the window display. No more poetry. Just cookbooks and business bios. Fitting. I kept walking until I reached the park. There was a bench by the fountain. I sat down and watched the water ripple under the street lamps. Around me, life moved on: joggers, families, laughter in the distance. And I thought about Olivia. How fast her world had unraveled. How the woman who once curated every detail of her image, the speeches, the panels, the carefully posed Instagram posts, now had no audience left to fool. She wasn't a villain. She was just someone who couldn't stop chasing attention. And when the attention turned on her, she disappeared. The final blow came through a mutual friend, someone from the business world. He stopped me after a conference. Hey, he said, hesitating. I saw Olivia last week. I raised an eyebrow. Where? She came to a charity event. Alone. No smile. No champagne. Just stood near the back. Didn't speak to anyone. I nodded slowly. She's trying to rebuild, maybe? He sighed. Maybe. But some things don't bounce back. Not when people know. He paused, then added, I always thought you were too good for her, man. I didn't respond. It wasn't about being better or worse. It was about being honest. And once trust breaks, titles and events and charisma don't fix it. I went home that night and deleted the video from my drive. Not because I forgave her, but because I no longer needed proof. Everyone else had seen it now. Her house of mirrors had collapsed. And I was no longer inside it. The first few months after the divorce were surprisingly quiet. No drama. No late-night phone calls. No awkward run-ins. It was like the universe knew I'd been through enough and decided to cut me a break. I focused on my business. Clients who had heard whispers about what happened offered unexpected support. You handled it with class, one said. Another told me they respected how I'd stayed composed. That meant more than I expected. Work grew. Not in a flashy, overnight success kind of way, but in a solid, dependable one. I doubled down on what I did best and the momentum followed. What I didn't expect was meeting Mara. It was at a local author panel of all places. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I'd been invited by a friend who bailed last minute. I figured I'd slip out early, but then Mara spoke. She was on stage reading from a memoir she'd edited, raw, thoughtful, full of heart. I stayed the whole time, not because of the book, but because of her voice. Steady. No pretense. Afterward, I introduced myself. We ended up talking for over an hour about writing, grief, and the kind of quiet strength it takes to start over. Mara was a widow. Her husband had passed 3 years earlier. She had a son, 10 years old and soft-spoken, with his mother's eyes. We started slow. No labels. Just shared moments. She never asked for explanations about my past. She waited until I was ready. And when I finally told her everything, she didn't pity me. She just listened. I'm not here to fix you, she said. I'm just here. That alone meant everything. We built our connection over steady ground. No secrets. No games. It was the first relationship where I didn't have to read between the lines. And I never once felt like I had to earn her love. It was given freely, not because she needed something, but because she believed I deserved it. That kind of love is rare. It taught me I didn't have to be perfect. Just honest. A year and a half after we met, we moved in together. Her son warmed up to me slowly. I never pushed. We found rhythm in simplicity. Saturday pancakes, bookstore visits, walks by the lake. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I could just be. 3 years after the divorce, we relocated to Seattle. It felt like the right kind of distance. Not a running away, just a new chapter. We bought a small house near the water. Adopted a dog, a golden retriever who thinks he's a lapdog. The days slowed down in the best way. Olivia reached out once, a letter. It wasn't long. Just a few paragraphs. She said she was sorry. That she understood now what she'd lost. That she hoped I was happy even if it wasn't with her. I read it once. Then tucked it in the back of a drawer. I never responded. Not out of bitterness, just clarity. That version of my life was over. I didn't need to reopen it. I'd made peace with the pain, not by forgetting it but by letting it change me. What Olivia broke had forced me to rebuild with purpose. And in the process I found something better. Not just love but myself.